All right, here we go, guys. Okay, we got some weird feedback going. I'm not connected to the FM broadcast. Hang tight. Let me see what's going on. What is an ism? Socialism, capitalism, voluntarism, communism. That's what an ism is. All right, looks like we're having some kind of delay on the FM broadcast. Hold on, I'm trying to get a signal back, so hang tight. Yeah, like a category of thought, yeah. Oh, a manner of thinking. Yeah, you bet. Okay. Let's try it again, guys. Looks like I'm getting synced up here. FM folks might be out of luck today. Might just be Uber Conference and Periscope. Hang tight. Howdy guys, we're having some minor FM difficulties, so I'm going to try to get those ironed out before we get officially started. Hang tight. All right. See what we got. All right, testing. No, still got problems. All right. We're going to try this now. Well, we are having some difficulty. I'm going to hit the all right, FM's getting a rebroadcast tonight, my friends. Hang tight. We'll do Ask the Free Capitalist on Periscope and Uber Conference. Hold on a second. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Kind of weird. Okay. Well, there you go. We've got a rebroadcast playing on FM 88.1 here from Liberty Reef. And now we will proceed to do an episode, a commercial-free. You guys are going to get spoiled today. We're going to do a commercial-free episode. We'll just do Ask Rick, or Ask the Free Capitalist. So no formalities. We'll dispense with all formalities tonight. And I just welcome everybody. I still require you to wake up and turn your brain on. We can have some fun tonight. If you want to send me some questions, I'm going to pull up Facebook. You can send me questions via Facebook Messenger. You can send me questions via Uber Conference, or you can type your questions here on Periscope. Any one of those will work just fine. And I'll tell you, this is a private audience here with our small dozen or so listeners here on Periscope and half a dozen or so listeners on Uber Conference. Everybody who's listening over the broadcast will get an old episode. So, hey, just a couple thoughts for the day, just by way of getting started. A couple introduction thoughts that I had prepared for the radio show. The interesting thing about my travels yesterday, some of you saw that I did Ask the Capitalist on Periscope. Didn't seem to work out real well while I was on the road, but I was trying to dish it out, brothers. I was trying to give you the value. But on the way back, after I did the Free Capitalist radio show last night, I was driving and I had a friend CD, and I noticed it was old recordings of Free Capitalist Radio from back in 2006. And so I decided to put it in. And, you know, you have to know, I mean, I haven't listened to a lot of the old Free Capitalist Radio episodes. If I've recently rebroadcasted, or if we've recently published it online, or recently added it to the podcast stream, I've listened to it. But, you know, there are hundreds of shows, and I haven't listened to all of them. And so this CD was from March of 2006, and the first episode I listened to was March 15th, 2006, which oddly enough was an episode about Christmas. I have no idea why the episode was about Christmas, 3 months after Christmas. It was a discussion about Charles Dickens' story, The Christmas Carol. And I wasn't on the show. It was just Les McGuire and Gabriel Joseph, and they were talking about the meaning of the parable, meaning of the metaphor, and this kind of thing, and it was incredible. It was really good. So I'm going to prepare that one, and I'm going to put that one up here in the near future on freecapitalist.com, and I'll invite you to share that, to listen to that, and share that with people you know. It was refreshingly rewarding for me, but was also a bit. I had a tinge of sensitivity watching it, because I started to do the math, and I realized less than 90 days from the date of that broadcast, my friend Les McGuire, my friend Ray Hooper would be dead. When they crashed in that plane crash. So, you know, this is one of the last messages Les got to share, and it was this real powerful metaphor about Charles Dickens' story, Christmas Carol. So I'm going to write a little bit about that, and I'm going to share that with you guys. But I'm in a little bit in a sober mood because of that. So if you'll forgive me tonight, I won't be putting on too much of a tremendous show in terms of drama. I'd just like to sit here and chat with you. I'd like to have a sober, direct, we can have fun if you want, but I'd like to have a sober and direct conversation with you, sharing with you my thoughts and hearing from you what's on your mind. One of the reasons I offer that as an option here is because the radio show is playing the rebroadcast, and we're just doing this via Periscope. If you wonder why I'm speaking into the microphone, it's because I'm recording it. I know Periscope records it, but it's not great audio for the podcast, so I'm also recording this so that we can potentially use it if there's any brain-on value created here. But, there's some questions that have come up the last couple times I did Ask the Capitalist that I thought I'd speak to, and then maybe this will get your juices flowing, and maybe this will get you to start thinking, and this kind of thing. The two questions that have really got me thinking, the question from the other day, Jeff asked about how to find a moral solution to the war in Iraq leading to all these other things and our present dilemma, particularly regarding past conversation I had about what I thought we should have done or what we might have done. And then the second one was about gun control. I see a lot of conversations going on right now on the internet about gun control. I know a couple of you have asked me to chime in, and I will on Facebook. But let me just remind you this, my friends. And if you haven't studied the dichotomy between scarcity and abundance lately, if you haven't listened to my lectures on the 13 principles that cover this, and if you haven't been studying on your own, let me point something out to you that's maybe not apparent, that often gets left in the discussion, and it's very dangerous and very much to the detriment of people who love liberty. There is constant tension between two values in a so-called free society. In other words, when people set out to claim freedom, when people set out to claim to be part of a society that values freedom, there is tension between liberty and security. And because think about this, the proper role of government, if you go back and read the Declaration of Independence and believe that, the proper role of government is to secure rights. Yeah, there's a digital free capitalist primer. The proper role of government is to secure rights. Why? Well, because our rights are threatened. And self-evidently, they have to be threatened from something besides government, because governments are instituted to protect us, to protect our individual, inalienable rights. And that means that there are some threats that aren't the government to our liberties. And when you think about that, and you think about why people want guns and why people have weapons, there becomes a tension between that liberty and security, because the very tool that can protect you can also be used to perpetrate wrong. So we get into these very passionate debates about guns, and you get otherwise rather intelligent people saying things like, we ought to have stricter background checks. We ought to not allow automatic weapons. We ought to not allow handguns. We ought to not allow high magazine capacity weapons, particularly long guns, shotguns, rifles, things like this. And of course, there are genuinely good and intelligent people who look at what happens in a tragedy that involves firearms, and they want to not see that. And they want to institute government to secure their rights. And they want legitimately to be taken seriously in that conversation. People in the liberty movement do not further the cause of liberty by simply shaming such people or by simply dogmatizing on the issue. And to engage in that conversation very intelligently, we have to begin with an acknowledgement and put first things first, that there is a steady and constant tension between liberty and security or safety. And those who would put security first as the highest value in our society would apparently, would self-evidently put liberty in some other place, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. And what the founders taught us, and what the American tradition teaches us, and what people who love liberty know, whether you know it cognitively or you know it cognitively, but whether you know it because of deliberate study or whether you've just learned it by observation, if you put anything besides liberty first, you end up losing free society. And so the enemies of free society are constantly putting on a show to rally up the cries for security, whether it's economic security, whether it's physical security, whether it is job security, right, which would be economic security, whether it's safety. So when we start these conversations, we have to just immediately begin the conversation, which is, if you had to choose between the two, which would you choose? Freedom or safety? Now, some people say, well, you shouldn't have to choose. I agree. But if you did, which would you choose? And those who choose safety do not love liberty. They like it. They will use it. But those who choose safety choose an idea that leads away from the genius that is America. Chooses an idea that leads away from prosperity and peace. Let me give you an example. Another word for security and safety is peace. In the name of peace, a lot of people are shamed into abandoning their claims for liberty. Matter of fact, I have some friends in the LDS liberty movement who have begun the path of selling out the cause of liberty by proclaiming nonviolence and peace as their highest priority. It's disgusting because when you think about the consequences of that idea, you see how they play into the hands of all the enemies of liberty. You see, people who love liberty are not soft and they are not unwilling to fight. The story of American history and the story of the American Revolution is being willing to lay down your life, your fortune, your sacred honor to fight for liberty, not safety. You know, the idea of give me liberty or give me death. Nobody says give me peace or give me death, right? You couldn't. It wouldn't make sense, right? Because that is the natural choice already. So one of the things that I caution you against, and I caution you to take very seriously, is don't oversimplify the narrative to the point that you forget to take account for this natural tension between liberty and safety. Because at some point, the arguments come down to the question of which would you prefer, liberty or peace. Now, if you want peace, you can get it through liberty. Think about this for a second. If you want peace, you can get it through liberty. But if you want liberty, there are many ways to go about, if you want peace, there are many ways to go about, quote unquote, securing the peace that don't include liberty. Every, modern despot and tyrant and totalitarian preys on your and my and your neighbor's desire for peace and wants us to give up liberty. And I like the quote from Reagan, who's also quoting. Now, there's a good challenge for you. Find the original. So that's my first thought for you tonight. If you want to be free, you've got to be willing to fight. And that implies in your own life, to the handful of you who took my invitation seriously to start down this, hold on a second, our choice is not liberty versus safety. It is liberty and life versus captivity and death. Understand, but the lie that's told to us is the choice between liberty and safety. And the choice is often put before us as liberty or safety. And the reason you're right, Darian, but I'm not sure if you see it or not. I don't know. But the reason you're right often undercuts the very statement you just said if you're not careful. Because you must prefer liberty over safety. In a principled hierarchy, if you're going to live a principled life, you have to come. There are times when those two are in conflict. And if you haven't refined your mind, your ideas, and your heart to choose values where you place liberty above safety, you will lose both. The gun debate is a good example of that. By the way, the debate shouldn't be about, I saw a comment earlier about gun control as aim, something like that. It's really people control, right? I mean, the call for legislative solutions here is people control. So let's just be honest. And who do you want to control? Well, you say you don't agree, but you have to give me an example. I will tell you that's if you don't see that, and I don't mean you individually, but I mean people in general, if they don't see that, that is the deception that leads God-fearing, Christ-following men to socialism. Because one is better than the other. Liberty and peace are not equal values. See, there is a value hierarchy in the nature of this universe. Think about this one for a minute. How about I teach you something? How about I teach you something? Is that all right if I teach you something? Can I share with you something? You have to go back and study you some Newton if you want to get in on this one. So why don't you think about colors for a minute? And I know oftentimes when you've been in school when you're a kid and they talk about the electromagnetic spectrum, they teach you about colors, and they always draw the electromagnetic spectrum this way. You know, they talk about the different wavelengths, you know, that you can see, and they talk about, you know, the visible light spectrum here, and they always, you know, you have red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, right? And they always teach it to you this way, like it's horizontal. And then over here, remember, just outside of the electromagnetic spectrum where we can't see, you have infrared. And I'm going to put that over here just for your mental reference. And over here on this side where you can't see, okay, I'm going to put you here with your eyes. Okay. Over here you have, obviously, ultraviolet. Yep. And we talk about this, and it goes, you know, you deal with gamma rays and X-rays and radio waves and everything, and they teach you this. But I want to just challenge you to do something for a minute. There are 7 Newton identified 7 primary distinctions in the electromagnetic spectrum we call the visible light rays. Now, I want you to imagine you put it this way. Okay? And I want you to imagine a hierarchy. Okay? Because we're talking about liberty and choosing liberty even when it's in conflict with peace. I'm just teaching a principle here, and I've backed up here a little bit. We're talking about Newton and the electromagnetic spectrum for a second because I wanted to show something. I wanted to do a little quick illustration. The radio show's not going tonight. I have a rebroadcast plan for the radio show, so this is just Periscope and Uber conference. So it's just for a small audience here, just having some fun. So feel free to chime in, feel free to ask questions. So I want you to imagine now, using Newton's example, you got these 7 colors, these 7 divisions of the electromagnetic spectrum. You could wish they were in a different order till you were blue in the face. But if you put up a prism that reflects a white light that divides that light, it's going to divide it into the same order. Right? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Every time. Now you can manipulate that. You can change the structure of the device using to divide the light. You can do all kinds of things to manipulate how that light is refracted. But the composition of that light comes in a hierarchy. And you can argue all day long that you wish orange was where red is. Or you wish yellow was where red is. And you can say you prefer that. You can say you prefer the appearance of yellow. No problem. And you can even say you prefer that yellow would be first on this hierarchy. But your preference would be out of line with natural law. Okay? So it is in the philosophy of liberty, in a free society, in what I call the philosophy of American liberty, there are also 7 values. Okay? And liberty comes first. And if you don't put liberty there in your mind, you can say you prefer other things, but you're just as out of alignment with natural law as you are by saying, well, I prefer green be first when we draw the rainbow. You can draw it that way. And it has a flavor of your own artistic expression, but you're out of harmony with the principles. And therefore, now, again, artistically, fine. If you want to say something, if there's a reason you're making this argument or whatever, that's fine. You have the liberty to choose what that means to you. But you're not at liberty to change natural law, just like gravity. You can wish it would stop working, but your wish would be out of alignment with natural law. And see, the difference when you deny liberty and agency. Yes. Now, definitions are important here. Agency, generally, if you're asking that question from an LDS philosophical perspective, agency generally means the liberty to choose between good and evil. Okay? But if you want to broaden it to a little bit broader context, agency is your choosing mechanism, your freedom to choose, period. Okay? And then, generally we would equate those two. We'd say, and so liberty is the code word, if you will, for agency to someone like myself. Now, in the world, people sometimes use the word liberty to also mean freedom. It's not the same. The founders used this phrase. The founders, in the founders' era, used this phrase. They use the phrase liberty of conscience. The liberty of you to choose inside. So even if someone takes away all of your freedom, puts you in handcuffs in a dark, dang dungeon, you still have liberty of conscience. Okay? And that's where free society starts, is respecting the liberty of conscience. And that's what the devil is trying. If you're a religious person, if you're a Christian, particularly if you're an LDS Christian, when it says the devil sought to destroy the agency of man, people misunderstand that, and they think that he sought to destroy the freedom of man. Certainly the devil doesn't like men being free. But the more evil thing, the root of evil is to destroy the agency of man. Matter of fact, you'll read in the scriptures that the root of evil is the love of money. But you got to understand what that is. That's an articulation and a translation issue that if you study that, will blow your mind. Because the most evil thing you can do is to deceive. It's the most immoral thing you can do, is to deceive. Because it's the most insidious form of force. Because you're forcing the mind of another human being. Now, right next to it is forcing the body. No question. That's evil. It's immoral. It's wrong. But you notice the devil in the scriptures is called the liar from the beginning. That's how you destroy agency. You can infringe upon a person's agency by limiting their freedom. But when you deceive them, they can't choose anymore. Because they think they are choosing, but they're not. If I told you that this was good and this was bad, and pretend like it's not Mountain Dew and water. If I gave you two things and I said this is good and this is bad, now choose, and you were deceived by me and you choose good, but you really obtained bad, your choice is nothing. Your choice is futile. And so, that's a longer answer to your question. Now let me go back to Newton for a second. Liberty is at the top. Okay. Now you'll also notice, don't start talking to me about muscle testing, Denny. Just craziness. I'm not a mystic, and muscle testing in almost all circumstances is bullshit. It's mystical nonsense. Weak-minded people being preyed on by deceivers. Now there is a small truth to muscle testing. And if you find people who know the truth, when I say small, I don't mean insignificant. For every 99 people out there telling you about muscle testing, they're deceivers, or they're deceived. There's one that knows some truth about kinesiology and the electromagnetic influence on the body and the power of the spirit of truth. Not very many people know that. Muscle test, it can't now. I don't know what you're talking about. I understand the theory, and we might get a little off track here, but it's mostly bullshit. It's not. Maybe that's what you're saying. Maybe that's what you're saying when you say it's your subconscious mind tricking you. There is a small amount of truth. Look, your body has frequencies. There's no question. Your brain waves are electric, and there's energy in all the cells of your body. No question about it. And there is an effect on the spoken word on the elements. That's true, but most people have no idea all about that. Well, you can say you're a massage therapist, but now you're talking about touch, and touch is different. Touch is different. You're being manipulated by mystics. I'm telling you. I'm telling you, as sure as the sun's going to come up in the morning, Anne-Marie. Now, if you want to understand the physiology of touch, there's a whole different physiological truth going on there. Here's the problem you've got. You get soft-hearted people who are open to inspiration. You get soft-hearted people who are open to inspiration, and they get this idea. And they recognize there's some truth to it, like the power of touch, or the power of the spoken word on physical reality. And you get soft-hearted people open to inspiration, and they haven't invested in their mind. And so they're prone to deception. They swallow that one truth with a package of 9 other lies and then go out and repeat it, and that's how you indoctrinate mysticism. Let me give you an example. Let me give you a different example, not talking about muscle testing and all this nonsense. Radio waves, the electromagnetic spectrum. There were people who understood that there was some truth to this idea, and they talked about this ether, this energy that flowed through space. And for every 100 people that talked about that, there was one that knew that it was consistent with scientific truth that just had not yet been discovered to the point of being measurable or articulatable. Most people just thought it was spiritualism, craziness. And now you've got a phone. The spoken word is belief made audible. That may not be true. What? This is like bumper sticker philosophy today. I mean, really? Think about that. So here's a question. Can the spoken word represent something you don't believe? Sure, people lie. The spoken word are sound symbols. They're reference for the creation of the mind. Nah, that's not true. There's power in the spoken word. There's objective power in the spoken word. I can prove it to you if you're interested. But let's not get all mystical. Again, when you have soft-hearted people, which I mean good people, who have underdeveloped ideas, you get all this kind of nonsense out there where there's a kernel of truth and a bunch of deception. It's like homeopathy, a bunch of bullshit 99% of the time. Kernel of truth that changes people's lives for the rare people that actually studied out and dedicate themselves to actually understanding truth. See, it's a short circuit. I can teach you any truth you got. I know mystic free capitalists. Let me be clear. There's an addiction to people. People like the easy path, the short path. They want something for nothing. I will, sure. Watch. I can prove it to you in 2 seconds. Oh, my phone. I can't. I was looking for my phone. My phone's in front of me. I can tell Siri. I can ask Siri a question, and Siri hears it objectively, absolutely. Doesn't matter who says it. Doesn't matter whether I believe it. Speech is a physical phenomenon. A computer can be trained to recognize it. So speech it's a physical phenomenon just like touch, because it's just a vibration. It's just sound. So that's where you got to start that conversation. And every vibration, every sound has a unique signature. It's what makes my voice sound like mine and yours sound like yours. And then that's the beginning. That's the beginning. Now, let me go back and talk to you about this laziness. I meet a lot of people who, the scriptures use it this way. They're ever learning, but never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. They grasp on to a good idea that maybe they're blessed with a gift of discernment, maybe they're incredibly intelligent, naturally high IQ, whatever, and maybe they're spiritually sensitive and they know the truth, all these things. They get a truth. They know something. But rather than study it and dedicate themselves to understanding it and its relationship to other things in reality, they become mystics and create a philosophy that's not grounded in truth. It's just grounded in fairy tale. And then they become friends with other people who will submit or assent to the fairy tale. And whether they call it a cult or a religion or a philosophy, that's what most men do. And the reason I have discovered that is because for a person who takes truth very seriously, there are countless experiences where you try to explore the truth with someone and they abandon it in favor of mysticism. And so when you're talking about the kinesiology involved, the truth of kinesiology, when you're dealing with human touch or the effect of sound, and when you're talking about the power of the science of the mind and things like you know, I'm trying to remember the word, but the idea that sometimes spoken words by themselves can have power. You have little kernels of truth that are so powerful that people, it's like giving a little 5-year-old keys to a car. Sound is merely the carrier wave. The sound is without any meaning that we don't give it. Well, that's true. I think it's John, right? Isn't Idealist here? Isn't it John who's telling me this? Eclectic Idealist. Isn't that John? Or do I have it wrong? Hey, Eclectic Idealist. How do you want me to call you? What do you want me to call you? Yeah, it's not your fault, Jeff. I know. So it is true. It is true, John, that sound doesn't have meaning to you until you acknowledge it. So if you hear someone speaking in a different language, it doesn't have any meaning to you. You can't recognize it. You might be able to recognize it as human speech. But it's a little bit more than that, because let me give you an example. That meaning can become a shared meaning between people. So, for example, the sound of a word means the same thing to me and you. So then intelligent beings recognize that sound as having a certain meaning, or that symbol, that sound symbol, as having a certain value. And then you can have whole communities that recognize that sound as having a certain value. And so then you start to recognize that what you talk about as meaning, in our philosophy, in the free capitalist philosophy, we call that demente, the space, the space in your mind where subjective truth exists, where you get to choose whether you acknowledge that meaning or not. But you have to understand that meaning isn't purely a human function. In other words, it's not just the human mind that can cognize meaning. We can train animals to cognize meaning, and they can recognize certain sounds and recognize what those sounds are communicating. And so then you start to realize that life in general, the difference between life and death in objects has to do with subjective truth is incomplete truth. Oh my gosh. And so what happens is, if you really start to get deep into this, all living things, liberty, by the way, liberty is possible because of subjective truth. That's what liberty of conscience. Let me teach you something else real quick, so we can have a common vocabulary. Let me share something with you real quick. I'm going to use words that I want to define. You can define them however you want, okay? For the sake of this conversation, so you know what I mean, let's have these words mean something. I'm going to talk about 3 kinds of truth. I'm going to talk about a truth I call de jure. For me, what I mean when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about rules. Natural laws of the universe. Okay? The laws of science, objective, immutable rules. De jure truth has 3 qualities. It's objective, absolute, and universal. Okay? Then I want to talk about de facto truth. De facto truth has to do with physical reality. Okay? De facto truth, that's supposed to be a circle, by the way. De facto truth has to do with physical existence. The truths of physical existence. So the fact that this cardboard, you're not really being a jackass, are you, when you say wrong, Jure? I don't understand what you mean. What? Sorry, maybe I'm a little sensitive because I've had people jump in turn into jackasses on this. Sorry if that's a little crude statement, but I'm not in the mood to deal with that. Look, I don't care what you call these. We could call these other color. Yeah. Okay. Look, I could call this A truth and B truth and C truth. Let's not get hung up on the words I'm using to describe a concept. De facto truth has to do also with objective reality. Okay? But objective reality, it's also absolute, but it's not universal. In other words, there could be a tree here today, but not tomorrow. It can be limited in time. Objective reality changes over time because of the natural law, second law of thermodynamics. But both of these truths are objective. In other words, if I get up and leave this room, this chair behind me is still going to be here de facto, and you all, scientifically, are going to still be able to see it. The laws of the universe don't change if I'm here or not here. Where my identity exists, first and foremost, and where my mind exists first and foremost, is a kind of truth we'll call de mente, or of the mind. This is the meaning of things. So, for example, they all have a relationship, by the way. I'm going to call those the three dimensions of truth for a second. De mente has to do with meaning. So, for example, if you and I run into each other on the street and we bump knuckles, we didn't say anything to each other. We touched each other, but we might not, somebody watching might not know what that means. Okay? Or you talk about gestures people make. In some cultures, a gesture is accepted to mean one thing, and among other people, a certain gesture is meant to be another thing. I used to like playing baseball. We used to have little secret signs, and we would do little things to tell you whether to bunt or to hit or whatever to do. And pitchers would tell you a fastball, curveball, slider, whatever. These physical symbols. Now, de mente is when your mind interprets the meaning, and so this is the when people say, "Well, this is my truth. This is what things mean to me." This is subjective truth. This is where preferences exist. Okay? This is where enjoyment is acknowledged. Well, this is where de jure truth is perceived, and de facto truth is perceived, but it's more than that. It's not just the perception, it's the volitional choice related to how you process that truth. Let me give you an example. Now, if you stop talking for just a minute, let me get through this example so I don't get distracted, or I'll just ignore you. Let me give you an example, because this is a real serious point if you want to think through some of these concepts. And this is why people get screwed up on liberty all the time, because they won't think. So, I talk about my kids. I'll talk about my 10-year-old son. Now I'll talk about my 8-year-old son. I have an 8-year-old son. He's a little more hard-headed than my other children, and I've used physical discipline on him more than I have used with other children. He's the kind of child sometimes you have to stop by grabbing him and say, "Hey, knock it off." And it's funny because I've given him a spanking before, and it's funny. And for you DCFA agents on here, go to hell. I'm happy to defend myself. Sorry, I'm just in ornery mood, so you're gonna have to tolerate a little bit of that. But my son's how I spank him, right? Now, I haven't spanked him for so long, I can't remember the last time. It's been in probably years. But I remember I was playing with him once, and we were wrestling. And he started hitting me. I mean, he was trying to get away, and we were screwing around playing, and he was laughing, I'm laughing, and he's hitting me, and I said, "Don't you hit me again." And he hits me, and he's getting tough, he's getting older. And thanks. And I grabbed him, I turned around, and I whacked him on the butt. And he didn't even care, He just turned around, and he tackled me, and he's calling his other brother, say, "Come over and get Dad," and we're playing around wrestling. And I said, "You knock it off. You're going to get hurt. You're going to get hurt." And I whacked him on the butt really hard again. And he laughs, and he laughs, and he laughs. And I said, "All right, here's the deal. Every time you touch me, I'm going to get you back. I'm going to hit you back." And so he and his brother started playing. And they would come up and just touch me, and I'd go, whack! And they would laugh and run and run and run and run. And they'd come up and they'd touch me, and I'd whack! And I got to the point where I was hitting them, quite frankly. I was hitting them hard. And and they're laughing and laughing and laughing. And my one son says to the other, "Be careful, they're starting to hurt." And I said, "Are you getting hurt?" "No, don't stop, Dad. Don't stop, Dad." And he comes up to me and whack it. He's like, "Ow!" And I'm like, "All right, we're going to stop. I don't want to hurt you." "No, Dad, this is fun. This is great." And it got me to thinking how, first of all, how sometimes human beings are demented. And then it got me thinking about football. And I remember being a running back. And I'm going someplace with this. I remember being a fullback. And I remember the feeling, I don't know if any of you have played football. It's not conditioning. Conditioning is related to it, but that's not what it is. That's not what's going on. Conditioning enables something else to happen. Here, hang tight for a second. Hang tight for a second. Yeah. So I remember playing football. And I played fullback for a long time. And I remember we're on like the 3-yard line. It's high school football. And I'm second string fullback. And we had another guy who was really good. And for some reason, coach calls my number. And I'm like, man, this is my deal. If I get a chance to get in the end zone here, this is it for me, you know. And I just remember bracing myself for running. They call this play, and I even remember the name of the play. I won't bore you with all those details. And basically the play is I'm going to run right up the middle. You know, the center is supposed to clear a path, and the left tackle and the left guard are supposed to clear a path, and I'm supposed to just run right up the middle. And the problem is when you do that, you know, all these guys are way bigger than you, okay? All the defensive linemen are so much bigger than you. And they want to kill you, you know. I mean, they want to stop you. They don't want to kill you physically, right? And I remember the feeling. I can still feel it to this day. As you know, scoring this touchdown, it was an iconic moment in my mind. I remember I grabbed that football, and I mean, the quarterback just hit it in my gut so hard, and I clamped down on it, and I'm running as fast as I can to the line, and I remember hitting the line, and I remember, you know, the hole wasn't very big at all, and I went through, and I remember looking down, and I could see the white line that I was trying to cross the goal line, and I couldn't quite tell if I had the ball across, and I'm pushing, and the linebackers from the other guys are now coming in because the defensive linemen are holding me up, and these linebackers come in one side, wham, and then a guy on my team from behind me pushing me forward, another wham. Anyway, I get across, I get in the end zone, I fall down, and then all these guys fall on top of me, right? And they get off. I can barely breathe. I'm like, and I'm like, did I get it? Did I get it? I look over and the referee says score, and I'm like, yeah. And I mean, I got blood on my arms. I mean, my chin's dislocated. Somebody's hit me and knocked out one side of my chin. I'm like, yeah. And everybody's like, you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I didn't limp. I didn't whine. I was happy as can be because those hits, they happened de facto. Okay? And because of the De Jure Truth, they had a certain effect on my body. But those de facto and De Jure truths weren't the full story. Just like with my son. I could hit him harder when I'm playing with him, and to him it's all fun and games. The last time I remember spanking his bum, I remember spanking him so light, I'm not sure he felt it through his jeans. And he cried and cried and cried, you know, because it hurt his heart, right? And meaning, there was an experience that he had de facto, that the truth of that experience isn't fully understood. Yes, Viktor Frankl. The truth of that experience isn't fully understood by just looking at the de facto and the de jure truths. You have to then go to the mind and say, what did the mind mean? How did the mind interpret that meaning? And you, liberty, agency, you free man, free woman, you have the right to determine what things mean to you. This is where liberty lives. And it's subjective. It's your sole sovereign domain. Even God himself does not tread into that domain if you believe in God. You and you alone. This is you. This is individual, particular, and subjective. And tyranny exists. Tyranny exists. Yes, individuals determine meaning. Tyranny exists when groups interpret meaning and demand assent from individuals who dissent. Not dissent, dissent. Tyranny exists when people act so as to use force whether deception or physical force, to compel the mind of men. This is where choices are made. This is where choices are made. So that's where liberty lives. Come back over here. You can choose to prefer yellow, but you better acknowledge de jure, it's right here. So it is with liberty and peace. You can say you prefer to talk about peace. That's fine. But if you don't assent to the idea de jure, so what happens? Let me show you this. So these truths all relate to create one big whole truth. Okay? And if your de mente isn't rationally conformed to de jure or rationally conformed to de facto, you're demented. In other words, it means your mind, the way you're exercising your liberty of conscience, is demented, not in accordance with reason, with a rational connection. You know, it's like a person who sees a kitty cat de facto, but in their mind reacts as if it's a lion. That person's demented. Okay? Or a person who sees gravity, but thinks they can jump off a building and live because they're special. Okay? That's demented. So what human beings who are serious about the truth do is they dedicate their lives to owning this and then refining their ideas related to these things, to creating rational connections to these things. And the stronger those become, the greater leadership potential this person has, because other people will follow their meaning. There you go. Plenty to think about. Rewind it and watch it again. I spent years figuring all that out, and we could go on for hours about that. So, what happens when we talk about important concepts like liberty, and you have, hi Amy, I'm glad you're on the line. Thank you. I'm glad you joined us. I didn't know Alma had a wife. Man, good for him. Boy, good for you. I don't know. I don't even know you, and I'm sure he probably got the better end of the deal. You understand what I'm saying? I just like to tease guys. I have no idea what I'm talking about. That's all demente. That's all my demente. He probably is a lucky man. He probably is. I've seen some of his Facebook pictures. I didn't know anybody'd marry that guy. I'm just teasing. See, humor's demente, and sometimes it can get pretty demented. Hi, Alma. How are you? So one of the things that happens in these conversations about freedom and liberty is you'll spend your time talking with someone, and you'll get to the point where they just won't acknowledge certain principles. They will cling to their demente. They will still choose to believe what they want to believe, even though they don't have any rational reason. So you argue that liberty is greater than security, lives in the realm of de jure. Well, the preference of liberty or security exists in the realm de mente. But the de jure rule for a free society, there is a de jure rule for free society. And that de jure rule requires that liberty be primary. Another way to look at it is the de jure is sometimes also like recipe. Connect some more dots. Why can you not have peace without valuing liberty first? Well, liberty is where the principle of non-initiation of aggression comes into play. If you don't respect liberty, then there is no immorality in aggression. And therefore, there is no moral acknowledgement as to the sanctity of peace among a society. And look, none of this is a problem. There's just one person, right? I mean, there's no such thing as liberty or peace in the sense if there's just one person, one mind acting. But let me go back to this. You think about the de jure truth not just as the laws, but as the recipes. So, for example, yeah, you can have peace without liberty in the sense that you can have the absence of violence being perpetrated on you, sure. For a time, anyway. I'm not sure if you can have it for a long period of time. But you go back, and I think about an analogy that you teach young children, and I don't mean to be too condescending, but if I give you a recipe for how to make brownies, you can have all the ingredients, but if you put them together out of order, you're not going to get brownies. And that's how free society is. That's how a liberty-based society is. What the founders found, the reason our republic is different, the reason the American experience was different, isn't because the founders were the first ones to identify liberty as a value. And it isn't because they were the first ones to want to have rules of law. I hear a lot of people say, well, we're a society of laws, not of men, and all this kind of stuff. The reason the founders were geniuses, the reason the founders, they weren't the first ones to think of self-government either, Alma. John Locke, absent John Locke, a lot of the founders would have had a very primitive understanding of a lot of these concepts. And not just John Locke, but he's a great one when it comes to self-government. The genius of America was they discovered the rule, what Jefferson called the ancient principles, the template, the recipe for free society. If for those of you who are religious, for a Zion society. They were the first in modern times. In the modern era. They were the first. They're the only ones, actually. And they discovered the formula. And the formula exists de jure. In other words, if you put those ingredients together differently, you get France, not America. Yeah, your preference of peace, what is peace to you? And that's true in the sense of defining the concept peace, but there is a de facto element of peace. If you define peace as the lack of physical aggression, your mind doesn't define that. Well, that's not true. There is some element of your mind defining that. I know some men and women who define some types of play as peaceful and acceptable, and others would call it aggressive. Conformity to peace gets you back. Well, fear. See, where fear, when you put peace at the top, you then open up fear. So if we were to explain what happens when you get the recipe out of order, when you put peace at the top, you open yourself up to fear. And then you start avoiding rather than pursuing. See, you can't obtain liberty by avoidance. But there's an illusion you can obtain peace by avoidance. That's why you get a lot of wimpy people in the libertarian movement. Well, it could be. I don't ascribe to that definition of peace, but you get a certain type of peace. That's why I'm saying that. Look, I mean, that's another conversation about what the definition of liberty and what the definition of peace should be. In this conversation, we're using the definition of liberty, meaning being free from force, being free from uninvited force. Yeah, it can be. I would argue at its core, in a philosophical sense, there's a political theory of peace which is not unique. I mean, in a free society, we've got words have to mean something for us to communicate in, and the most useful definition in Western civilization for peace is the absence of physical force and absence of coercion, which is deception. Yes, free from the initiation of force, and there are two types of force. There's mental force and physical force. One is more sinister than the others. Now, let me bring this to a close since we've been going on longer for an hour. One of the reasons our society is breaking down is because society, the concept, is a shared understanding of concepts and values. And so if you don't have a shared meaning of terms, and you don't have a shared conceptual understanding of the world, and you don't have a shared recognition of a principled value hierarchy, there is no such thing as society. It's just a group of people living in proximity with each other. And one of the William Butler Yeats poem called The Second Coming, he predicts at a time right before the second coming of Christ. He says, the best among us lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. And one of the reasons people lack conviction is because they're mentally lazy. So my invitation to you when I say wake up and turn your brain on is you get to the gym, get to the mental gym. Free Capitalist Radio is like the mental gymnasium. All right, my friends, I told you it'd be a little low energy, not a lot of hype, not a lot of high energy, not a lot of drama, this kind of thing. I appreciate a dozen or so of you who stayed on board with us here for our episode of Periscope. Tomorrow I'm going to do my religious podcast, and then we're going to start Monday with the new format of Free Capitalist Radio, being dedicated more to news and current events, illustrating where principles are being violated in the news stories of the day. So that should be fun. I invite you to tune in 10 o'clock on Monday. Until then, hang tight. Let's see. For those of you who are waiting for an appointment with me, I know some of you are waiting for a telephone conversation. Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. I'll be emailing you or calling you to set those up. So hang tight, my friends. Appreciate you being there with me tonight. This was fun. Take care. Warm regards from Liberty Reef.